Good morning and welcome to Coffee and Conversation, Insights from NCSC on Insider Threat. Now, please welcome INSA Vice President of Policy, Bishop Garrison.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our program. And we are absolutely thrilled to have two of our community's top leaders here with us today. Before we get started, as always, just a couple of housekeeping notes. So if you have questions, we absolutely hope you do. Please make sure that you're putting them into the question box on the right side of your screen. I'll do my best to address as many as possible. Additionally, we welcome members of the press today. Please note that this program is on the record and it is being recorded. You'll find more information also about our graduate student internship programs in the handout section. We have a PDF down there, so please take an opportunity, a moment to read through it. We have many students online this morning, so please download the file. If you're eligible, consider applying. The deadline is Monday, October 28th. Lastly, a big thank you to Sims, as you see behind me, our sponsor, for their continued support of this program. We could not bring this type and level of thought leadership to you without them and without many others like them. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our guest for today, coming from NCSC. So we have James Blasingame, the Assistant Director of the Enterprise Threat-Mitigation Directorate at the National Counterintelligence and Security Center. He is also serving as the Director of National Insider Threat Task Force and leads the National Operations Security Program. In these roles, Mr. Blasingame provides guidance and advocacy across the U.S. government and with public and private sector partnerships to counter insider threat and adversarial threats to the public health and safety, economic security, and national security. Joining him today, excuse me, as I catch my breath a little bit, joining James is Dr. Catherine Camilletti, Deputy Assistant Director at the Enterprise Threat-Mitigation Directorate. Dr. Camilletti supports the National Insider Threat Task Force and the National Operations Security Programs, promoting active, integrated mission practices that counter all aspects of adversarial and insider threats. James and Catherine, thank you for joining us today. That was a lot. I apologize. It was a lot all at once, but thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop. Now, we do have long resume pedigrees over here. It's government protocol, I guess. So
yeah, worst things to have in the world right now, for sure. That's fantastic. We're honored to host you folks today. So to start off the discussion, can you just tell us a little bit about the work that Enterprise Threat and Mitigation Directorate actually does? What is your mission, and who are your main partners within the IC? And what are your priorities for the upcoming year?
Sure, absolutely. So I'll back that up just one bit. Since this is a coffee and conversation, I'll endorse my Pete's coffee. And I think, Catherine, what are you drinking? Illy coffee. So we want to make sure we had our coffee with us this morning. Our mission is, as you kind of alluded to in our kind of bio tee-ups, for the directorate, it's in the name, enterprise and then threat mitigation. So everything we look at is on the end of a balance of being 1 foot, I'll say, in the counterintelligence world and 1 foot in the security world. So how do we, as an enterprise directorate, look to help partners across the federal government, within the executive branch for our insider threat environment, within the whole of government with our operations, our OPSEC environment, and to a smaller degree, the third pillar that we look at internally within the intelligence community is our unauthorized disclosure of classified information. So a public, an unauthorized public release, if you will. And our work is we look at things from a policy, from a strategy perspective here at NCSC within the bubble of our overarching guidance or our marching orders. Executive Order 13587 covers us for the Insider Threat Program, along with a POTUS memo that incorporates minimum standards for the implementations of programs that are executive order just celebrated its 13th anniversary just the other week.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. So that said, 13 years with formal paperwork, but obviously this type of behavior, these types of activities have been long in the making, long in progress and maturity for decades, I would argue, as a natural occurrence of the counterintelligence security environment. Within the unauthorized disclosures for the intelligence community, we partner with FBI and DOJ in the 12 questions, the legal questions that we would look at for threshold requirements in there. So our goal is to make sure that policy, doctrine, guidance is up to date. We help implement that through our staff here at NCSC, at our campus here in Bethesda. And we look to help programs across the government implement effective programs to help mitigate those threats within their own organizations. And it scales because IC requirements are a little more restrictive with classified material, DOD's a little different, and as we scale into our non-Title 50 partners across the rest of government where they have fewer holdings in classified information, they still nonetheless hold very sensitive information, proprietary information, personal identifying information, things that we wish to safeguard no matter a classification level adherence or not stuff. So we look to empower our partners through that, through extension, and what I hope is of a lot of interest to those that are joining us today. We take our efforts as a force multiplier of openness, candidness, sharing, because our guidance is unclassified, our methodologies are unclassified, and we put those out on our external facing web pages. We speak to them in forums like this and other forums throughout our recently held National Insider Threat Awareness Month campaign, which was in the month of September, where we engage with industry, public sector, academia partners and talk about how we, the government, look through that lens, that optic of insider threat and OPSEC. We cannot dictate how one would do it. We simply encourage what we see as best practices, what we've experienced as things that function well or execute well in our process, and share those to help industry writ large, whether you are affiliated through a contract, defense contract, infrastructure support, or other affiliations with government, or completely unaffiliated with the federal government. These are good practices that every business environment should look at. I would argue every business that's out there has something worth protecting. And these practices that we use at the federal government, they are not magical. We don't have magical superpowers to make this happen. It is practical common sense, and we share that in hopes that others will take advantage of it and implement it within their fields of work based on their policies, guidance, state, local laws, their general counsel's guidance on what to do. That's a good summary.
Yeah, and I think for priorities for the next year, I think we want to continue to engage and conduct outreach with our partners doing the mission, both in the insider threat space and also the OPSEC space. We want to advance and mature those missions, both in OPSEC and insider threat. I think we want to advance the knowledge base that we have in those, especially for insider threat. And I think gathering insights from our partners through their annual assessments and reports, I think is one of the things we really want to do for both the OPSEC mission and the insider threat mission. It might sound like we're neglecting the unauthorized disclosure mission, but that's just on the IC side, so not something we really talk about as much publicly. But I think the other thing we want to do is really rejuvenate, the task force with dedicated resources for insider threat, and then also rejuvenate the OPSEC working groups that we've got with both DoD side and the federal government side. So I think those are priorities, good priorities for next year.
Very much so.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic way to just kind of give us a foundational understanding of what some of your priorities are as they relate back to the mission. And something James said that kind of stuck out, and I want to see if we can pull a thread on this a little bit. As you talk about best practices for industry, in a utopian sense, the absolute best that you would want to see or hope to see, what are some of those best practices for countering insider threats that you want organizations considering, even if it's just your top 2 or 3 or 4?
Sure.
Okay.
I think, some of the basics that are out there. So I think the first recommendation is we practice and we teach a course to our community partners on what we call a hub operation. So a core group of practitioners that help facilitate healthy insider threat groups or programs within organizations. And this is something that when we reach out in forums like this, we foot stomp because it's easy to accomplish. In our structure that we have now, they're unfunded mandates, and anybody that's with or affiliated with the federal government, loves and it's endearing to have an unfunded mandate because it's so difficult to get things done. But we drive on with that, and I think finding partnership, because most insider threat programs are relatively small. In many cases, many practitioners across the spectrum, inside government, outside government, are wearing multiple hats. So how do you define success, or how can you more simply be successful in safeguarding? We find this arena, mission area writ large, very complementary to other areas, CI efforts, security, and we encourage our folks to seek partnership with their human resource, their general counsel, their wellness programs, if they have a medical staff or just a diversity equity environment within their offices, and their security programs, their cyber folks, their IT, their CISO that they might have, because everything touches on this, whether you're looking at it in the simplest terms of a two-sided coin, from a technology aspect or from the human aspect, and both play a vital role in this. But having that partnership of understanding of how we will address things, because many things that touch upon the insider threat world will enter through an HR, an employee that is perhaps experiencing some difficulties with job performance or engagement, or an employee that is experiencing some external personal impact on their career that they need a little bit of a helping hand with. And many departments, organizations, and private industries have those resources or have connections to those resources. Security incidents as well, as we look at it. And I think the other area that I would say as we look to partnership is on the core aspect, take a moment from the insider threat, the OPSEC perspective, and with your assembled team to assess what is of most importance, what is of most value to your environment. As again, I mentioned, we have the intelligence community is worried about classified information and doctrine and DoD as well. Industry could be worried about a plethora of things, whether they're creating software, widgets and gadgets for production, delivering supply chain issues. All of those things have an inherent value, and it means something to everyone a little differently where they sit and stand. And it's once you understand what is most precious to you as an organization, then it's assessing the third element, and I'll stop with this, is what is your comfort level for risk, or what is your assumption level of risk, or that tolerance. And that's a different scenario for each and every element, especially in the industry side, because that could be an impact on your profitability, your shareholder board impacts, etc. From the government, it is the unauthorized disclosure of information, espionage with our foreign adversaries that we don't want to get the advantage or have sensitive information, exposure. We've had historical things, the OPM breach from a decade ago. We don't want that information out in the public realm because we don't want to expose those that have applied for or are working within the U.S. government stuff. So those three primary elements would be the focus areas I'd encourage folks to take a stab at.
I would add one more that I think is similar to your point about leveraging existing partnerships. I think I would leverage existing work going on in an industry or in an organization, particularly around climate surveys and around healthy climates. I think organizations can do a lot to create a climate that is less conducive to threats. So teaching employees what to do if they encounter a suspicious email or are approached by an adversary or someone who might be an adversary or they're not sure is an adversary. what to do when they might engage in behavior that is a little bit more risky or might put their organization at a little more risk. So I would say having that healthy climate, thinking about communicating to the workforce the priorities, communicating how their jobs align to the mission. I think all of those things go a long way in creating that climate.
Yeah, I'll echo that as well. Catherine's done some great preliminary work on this. It's where, I fall into the old school category. It's like, great, here's the employee climate survey again. How long can I have to do this and how fast can I get through it type of thing. But if we take that data, which we're like, how does that apply to insider threat or OPSEC? It gives you some insight, a little bit of the pulse of your organization. Are you healthy as an organization in the ways that you wish to be? Is your workforce happy, satisfied, content, or the opposite? And if so, what areas do you look at? And do those areas of concern give your security, your CI folks, your insider threat OPSEC folks some foundational building blocks or areas from which to at least look at to help evaluate? It's like, we have a pretty happy workforce, so we feel pretty good, or we have a really unhappy workforce around annual leave time or promotions, and so we need to up our game around the promotion season or budget season, whatever that flavor might come out in your survey, to be aware that at certain points along I'll focus on a calendar year, some of your employees may be feeling greater amounts of personal and professional stress that may be indicators and be the first elements of causality in any concerning behavior. Last year's NITAM theme was bystander engagement, and one of the taglines that I took from that and have used continually is more about turning people around versus turning people in. And I think that really echoes as a wonderful theme for insider threat in general. We do not investigate, we look at cases, we make referrals to those that have those authorities and activities, but it's really about everyone, no matter where you're from, your organization has made an investment in you. More so if you have a security clearance, but the longevity, 401ks, there's an investment. The goal is to keep you as an employee of that organization, ideally a happy employee of that organization.
At the end of the day, we're human beings, and people, for a variety of reasons, a variety of pressures, make mistakes, have missteps, and it's important for us to have some level of grace and empathy as we are engaging in this type of activity, for sure. I'm sorry, please finish your thought.
Yep, that empathy is a key aspect of just that simple, as you said, Bishop, that human kindness element of checking in on your coworker, making sure, and sometimes that's all it takes, right? There are more advanced cases or cases more concerned, but as we look to focus on turning folks around or their well-being, it makes us safer. It helps us do these jobs better.
Absolutely. So we've hit on a lot of different pieces on this, particularly, and I'm kind of glancing at the notes I've taken as we relate it back to, at the end of the day, how people behave. You talked about being able for organizations to do proper risk assessment, to know the level of risk they're able and willing to take on just in their own procedures, and particularly when we're talking about protecting and defending things like IP, like logistics, supply chains. This isn't just about the bottom line, about the profitability of a company, return on investment. That's a part of it. But the greater stance is our security, and letting those types of leaks out could be having absolutely a heinous detrimental impact overall to mission, to operation, to focus, particularly when you're talking about something like the intelligence community. So Catherine, I want to bring it back to you for a second, because you are a behavioral scientist by trade. So how, and James kind of mentioned some of your research, but how does that research background, understanding how people interact, understanding how they behave, how does that shape your understanding of the insider threat mitigation process and just enhancing the security processes that we have overall?
Yeah, thank you for this question. I really like this question because I think as a behavioral scientist, I've been thinking about how very few folks, and this is the model when we talk about the critical pathway to insider threats, this is the model that's based on, right, that people come to an organization, and very rarely are folks coming to an organization with the desire to commit espionage or to be a threat or to be an insider risk or any of those things. I think what's important to me and what I've learned is that we are much more, as humans, much more a product of our situations and the experiences we all have than who we are innately. And I think about this when thinking about traffic, right? So if I'm on my way to work and somebody cuts me off, I think, oh, that person's a jerk. But if I'm on my way to get my kid from daycare and I have to be there at 5 p.m. on the dot and I cut somebody off, I'm just trying to get to where I'm going, right?
Exactly.
And so I think the situation
is helpful.
Exactly. And so we talked a minute ago about a little bit of grace and a little bit of understanding. And I think that's the same here. And I think with that mindset, going into an insider threat, whether it's an investigation, whether it's an assessment, I think thinking about these individuals as people first, and they have engaged in behavior or they have experienced things that have made them a little more risky. They might be engaging in behavior that is putting our organization at risk, but that doesn't mean that that person is necessarily the threat, right? It's the things that they are doing that are making their organization exposed or are exposing their organizations. And so what supports, what resources do we put in place? Sometimes that might mean removing somebody from access, but other times I think it means giving them a little break or giving them some extra support, giving them the extra resources, giving them a way to air any grievances they might have, to get some sort of mitigation that feels respectful. I think that's one of the things that I would think about as a behavioral scientist, is that we're all human and we all experience these different things. I think that being said, we also know from our own work and talking to organizations and knowing that our adversaries are do have plans or do want to target our organizations, both in the federal government and in private industry. I think we also know that those are threats as well. And so we have to be prepared for those types of incidents too. So I think that's a little bit my security hat as opposed to my behavioral science hat.
Yeah, and I think there's just some outstanding thought process analysis on that. Thank you. And I think there's definitely a common thread here too, as we're talking about the social behavior, the behavioral aspects of this. One thing we talk about too is social engineering and how people fall into the traps, whether it's through phishing or whether junk mail or these types of things. But something we're also seeing a lot of is issues of social media, because that there are a lot of pieces as they relate to misinformation, to disinformation, to all types of aspects of issues on this. So it really for both of you, but as you've already mentioned, Catherine, your background is behavioral scientist. But James, your career and background with ODNI and with the FBI, how do they help to not only inform your understanding of threat mitigation and personnel vetting, but the current practices with any potential use monitoring of social media as it pertains to identifying those types of threats? Now, and again, I mention this because we know kind of the elephant in the room. Everyone is worried, I think, to some degree, rightfully so, about the use of social media whenever we're talking about background checks and going into, the adjudicative process. No one has time to sit here and comb through millions and millions of points of data that are many of which are anonymous when on social media. But there could be some positive aspects to looking for the exact type of thing we're talking about. Someone that's looking for help, that's having some type of trouble. They're putting up their hand in some type of way through social media and kind of using it as a flag. So just based on your backgrounds and understanding threat mitigation, personnel reform, behavioral science, what are some of the key practices in monitoring that as it pertains to, as I mentioned, identifying these threats?
Sure. So I think my background prepared me well for this. Time at the FBI, working a bunch of various investigative matters from counterintelligence, counterterrorism, criminal, etc. Back in the day, I think it helps me appreciate where we're at today, and then looking through it from a policy governance type lens at this point. So really having the ability to take the collective of that's my 30th year in federal service, at this level, and then
30 years young there.
Thank you, appreciate that, thank you, yes. and seeing how that knowledge can cascade down, because it pops up in different areas and stuff as I see different departments and agencies within the federal government and engagement with private sector and industry folks, academia as well in that argument, and with groups like INSA and everything else. So many people are doing good work in this area of insider threat OPSEC to try to improve and safeguard. It's encouraging. From many years we saw post 9/11, struggles with stovepiping and everything. Our environment, what I'm pleased to convey, is that I feel we're very open in our work and our mission space here. It's not holistic. I won't paint a too rosy picture of it across every enterprise that's out there. But for the most part, we have a really good collaborative environment, and I think open discussion helps that. And I think to Catherine's aspect of when we encounter these people, they are under some type of stress, frustration, disheartenment with the apparatus, whether that's industry, governance rules. I mean, we could spend hours studying Snowden, Manning, Texera, why they chose to do the things they did. I think what I see historically from my experience over time is individuals that were looking to harm the government back in the earlier years, 80s and 90s of counterintelligence, Ames, Hansen, Walker, others like that, chose for some reason to have a political redefinition, if you will, for their behavior, to either in some cases harm, in some cases to strike a balance or perception of balance in world order. If everyone has something bad, then you reach that mad state of detente and everything, and trying to keep things balanced. And then as we move forward, now you're seeing individuals that, and this is where it's more of a complexity, and this is where we get into the field that Catherine and others come from in social behavioral science aspect, that we're seeing people that aren't necessarily disgruntled from a political motivator. Some have been unwittingly compromised, but we see some that are just seeing an injustice or an imbalance, or that they have not been heard. Mm-hmm. And they then react, their behavior is reactionary, at least to us, it seems that way, and how they are messaging out their information. It's like it becomes harmful to others, mm-hmm. less to self, even though there are legal consequences to their behavior, but the damage isn't as directly to those individuals. It is much broader in their version of how to rebalance. So I think I see that, and I think I see that not from a scientific perspective, just personal observations. When we get into the social media and stuff, I grew up in the pre-social media age, and pre-cell phones, and having one now. I grew up kind of, as I tell people, I'm kind of in a cave. I don't ever have my phone with me during the day. I don't do a lot of social media because I didn't grow up with it. Yeah. I see, challenges not only in our field, but challenges even broader than that when we look to hire a new workforce. It is hard for young professionals to join the federal government in a secured position that have to park their cell phone outside. I see it with Catherine and our other coworkers with young children that need to be in ready connectivity with caregivers, teachers, etc. So it complicates that on one side, social media, because it is so prevalent now, versus picking up the phone and leaving a voicemail or leaving a message with somebody. And then the influence that it has on a younger generation across, and even regardless of age and stuff. We have a question on AI later on, so I'll leave a little bit to that then. But when we see that influence there, it is very influential in the ability to inform. It's powerful on the positive, and unfortunately, it's also quite powerful on the negative as well. And I think this finding a healthy balance in the areas that we're looking at is, how do we help individuals? Sometimes we can engage early. We see those. Technology is allowed within the federal government some ability to give precursor knowledge to some concerning behaviors or precursor activities that we can step in and help. Many folks do not have that activity. When we get into industry and private sector, they don't have the reach or the compelling ability to find and see what social media is out there and what folks are doing. Does your crazy days in undergraduate school come back to haunt you years later when you're looking for career growth?
Yeah, I think social media is a really sticky point. I think, you know, there's a lot in the government we can't do with social media. Like, we can't, as a government, we can't monitor our employees' social media. We don't ask for usernames. We don't ask for passwords. We don't pretend to be somebody out there to befriend you to be able to look at your social media account. But I think that being said, I think to James's point about the influence that's there, I think a lot of us don't realize how influential social media is. Yeah. Even when you don't realize that there's so much that's happening unconsciously or subconsciously that drives our decisions and our thoughts, and that's why advertising is so powerful, right? But I think the other point that I want to echo with James and what you made too, Bishop, about people who might raise their hand and say, I need help on social media. I think that's where I at least go back to our NITAM event last year for bystander engagement. I think that's when it really is up to everyone. Everyone has a role in preventing violence. Everyone has a role in keeping our organization safe. Everyone has a role in keeping their colleagues safe. And I think if a colleague sees someone struggling or reaching out for help, then figuring out a way to help that person, even if it's just asking, do you need help? Can I help you connect? I think that's really important. And I think the other thing I think about with social media is the OPSEC concern. I think a lot of us don't realize the risk we are putting ourselves at if we list that we work for a particular government agency or when we're on vacation. And I think those are really basic kind of social media health checks that we can do, privacy checks, posting pictures of family and kids and pets. And that is all fodder that our adversaries are using and will use against us to target us. And I know that sounds really scary and really far-fetched and really out there, but it's true. We have evidence that and this is in the open press, that our adversaries are targeting employees who are disgruntled at different organizations, whether it's in the government or in private industry. And so if folks are putting out there that they are upset with their boss, or they are upset with their company, or they are struggling, those are things that our adversaries can identify as well, and they are out there watching.
Mm-hmm. And I would expand adversaries from potential foreign governments even to in the criminal realm,
yeah, for sure,
as well, especially when we leave federal government environment, in some cases still within, but as we get into the commercial sector and stuff, the criminal element of trade secrets, access to information it's marketable, it has value, and whether those individuals will exploit those behaviors as well.
Yeah, and it's not even always adversaries. Sometimes it could just be competitors or allies today who could tomorrow's competitors too, looking for an advantage. And they, to your point, they use all of that information to kind of make a bespoke method of targeting and making sure that they can really cultivate a target well. So we have a ton of audience questions, to no surprise. So what I want to do here is I see a few that I can kind of put together, and I want to do a few rapid fire because we have one or two more of our own questions too that I know we want to get through. But in some of this, there's some pieces that you've already hit on, and folks are just asking you to expand on a little bit. For instance, these are two questions together. Part one, who do you intersect with the most? Is it more government organizations or the private sector? And then part two, whenever you do talk about your overall outreach efforts to in sharing best practices, does that extend out to allies and partners in order to help their own insider threat programs as well?
Yeah, can I start with that one?
Please.
Yeah, okay, so I think with intersecting the most, I think traditionally we've intersected the most with government organizations, whether it's DoD, the executive branch, or IC. I think more and more we're getting more engagement from the private sector, or at the very least private sector is reaching out a little more. I think there's this acknowledgement that there are CI concerns that they have for their organization, and wanting advice and guidance on what can I do to protect ourselves and our assets.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, government first industry is growing between the Insider Threat Task Force environment that we have, and here at the national level at the center as well, a mandate to ensure that we have outreach with commercial partners, industry, academia, nonprofits, et cetera, to make sure that we're sharing our thoughts. On the allies and other partners, yes, absolutely. We have great relationships with our Five Eyes partners, and we exchange these ideas openly. Like I mentioned, you could go to ncsc.gov. I think the website's a little bit under construction right now, so might see. But that information is there for the American population to look at, and by extension to our partners and allies as well. Some would question, well, if it's out there in the open like that, it's also available to our adversaries. The simple answer is like, yes, but in any application, it's what you do with it. And this again is from a common sense perspective of how to build and manage a program. This isn't that rocket science of, we're sharing something that shouldn't be shared. This helps as a community, especially for here in the States and our allies and friends around the world, of how we do it. And then internally, a little privately, that we won't be able to discuss in this environment, we have those relationships that we are able to advance discussion with our partners around the globe. So.
That's fantastic. Yeah, you want to democratize this as much as possible, get the information out, make sure that people are utilizing it. So I think a great follow-up to this is a lot of our discussion today has been, the discussion has been based on what appears to be more of a shift from insider threat to insider risk. Do you agree with that? And can you expand on that idea a bit?
Yes, absolutely. So when I came to this position, it's the Insider Threat Task Force, it's the Insider Threat Program, and I would argue that many of us like to be insiders. Insiders, by definition, we are part of it. We're part of an organization. We have that internalized knowledge and access information. Nobody likes to be a threat, plain and simple, right? So while I think there's an impact with the nomenclature that's out there in the lexicon of insider threat and behaviors and stuff like that, it truly is about wellness. We are always hopeful that we can engage early on, because if we miss it, usually it's like clean up in aisle 3, spilt milk type philosophy, right? And at that point, harm most likely, in most cases, has occurred, and then we're mitigating how to minimize the impact of that harm or that potential harm that's out there, and then we have to assess it and evaluate it and stuff. And I think that applies, universally, whether it's internal or external to government. So as we look to safeguard our information, it is more about wellness, because that has a more of a longevity to it, and it allows us to kind of energize what I mentioned earlier on our hub operations. It helps find that synergy amongst partners within an organization, whether it's a standing committee of review, whether it's a triage of, we had somebody pop on our radar, whatever radar that is, technical, human, walk-in, tip line, whatever, that we need to come together and look at and determine as a group of professionals with the health and wellness of our organization at heart, who should look at it. Is this an HR concern? Is this a security concern? Is this a cyber vulnerability that we're seeing potentially being exploited in front of our eyes? So how do we stop it? And then how do we enact positive behavior, whether it's with that individual or down the road? So it's how do we assess potential lessons learned to make things better in the future? Because if it happens once, odds are it's going to happen again.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Catherine, please go ahead. You wanted to add something quickly?
I think the other side of that coin, I agree that it really is about wellness and about risk prevention. I think the other side of that coin, a lot of our partners say, if we don't have the threat word in there, then it doesn't have the gravitas. It doesn't have it doesn't get people's attention. And I think that's an aspect that we want to remember as well. But I agree with James. It really is about wellness and about risk prevention. Yeah,
threat tends to be a much more active word, as in risk. Oh, we can mitigate risk. But if it's a threat, it's right here, right now. So yeah, that's interesting. So I think we've got about enough time for 2 more questions. I want to take one more, definitely. from the audience here, and then I want to jump into give you like 30 seconds to talk AI here at the end of it. So we have a question about federal agencies who are looking to enhance their insider threat programs. What should their first step be to get assistance and resources from your teams?
Well,
Call us.
Yeah, call.
I mean, that's the, so we're structured. We have a team that's been in place for about 10 months now, and their sole functionality is outreach and engagement liaison to help partner with everyone. So first, if you are a federal partner and you have not heard from us in a while, my apologies. We will continue to strive to do better in that stuff as we ourselves are improving our internal refresh, as I like to call it. But if you need help, if you need assistance, reach out to Catherine and I. We'll put you together with our team, and our team spends a lot of time virtually or in person. Today, they're at 4 different agencies today alone, with face-to-face meetings with their insider threat partners to make sure they understand what the requirements are. We get draft documents from folks as we try to help at where everyone finds themselves kind of standing at the moment. Our goal is never punitive. It's encouragement and empowerment, because we want these programs to be out there, even if they are in a early development or redevelopment phase. It's in our collective best interest to be as supportive as possible. As I mentioned earlier, the unfunded mandates, resources are difficult, but what we try to do through our exposure across the community is try to share some of those best practices of how others have found success. And if one entity is struggling in an area that we know another entity has been successful, and this works better in the federal government, I would argue, than perhaps in industry, just for sharing and confidentiality at that level with industry, like industry and stuff. We've teamed them up in a mentoring construct to say, here's where we were 6 months ago, here's what we experienced as challenges, here's how we spoke to our general counsel or our CISO, CIO in engagement. And boy, they didn't understand us the first time, no matter what we said. And it took a while to get our kind of alignment of languages. So here's what we did, so please don't make the same mistakes that we did.
So lastly, I know we mentioned this earlier. For our last question, AI and emerging technologies. Everyone wants to know more about how they're being integrated into current systems, whether it's the high end, the low end, and what insider threat is doing, the insider threat community is doing to leverage them. Even here at INSA, one of our working groups within our insider threat subcommittee is diligently looking at the issue and trying to figure out what are some best practices in order to leverage these type of tools. So quickly, I know I'm asking for like a 90-second type answer, and I apologize for that, but how can AI and emerging technologies be leveraged to enhance the insider threat mitigation process?
Can you start with that one?
Please.
All right, so I've been thinking about this a lot. I think one way is through nudges. So I think a lot of us behave on our computers in ways that may or may not be risky. And I think if that happens, I would love to see the ability for AI to kind of recognize when we engage in behavior that is risky and remind us with a personalized nudge. Hey, you printed this document, but you have access to this document, but you don't necessarily have a need to know for this document. So should you be looking at this document? Should you be printing this document? Or clicking on an email that may or may not be suspicious? Is there a nudge that says, hey, you clicked on this email, and here's the best practice for engaging with emails that may be suspicious? And even beyond that, if our AI ML can recognize when people are typing words or typing phrases that might be concerning, searching for healthcare, searching for mental health care, searching for financing opportunities, I think, is there a nudge that can appear that says, here are some resources available to you in your organization, or here are some resources that we have partnered with. So there's personalized nudges that respond to our behavior that may be a little bit more risky, I think, is something I'd like to see.
I'll respond kind of in a bulleted fashion. So do we need it? Yes. Is it scary? Yes. But that doesn't out maneuver the need. And then in the positive of we need it as a force multiplier to help us, remember it is a tool.
Yeah.
Yes.
And in that overall construct, I encourage everyone to be open-minded about the application and the value of AI, no matter where your programs are structured, and also to be cautious. So as you look to introduce, this goes back to the team effort type of thing.
Yeah.
Have those conversations to be, how is it reflective? As Catherine has said, the nudges are fantastic, but is it a, security is going to nudge you on, should
Yeah.
you have printed this or not? The CISO or the IT folks are going to nudge you on, should you go to this website type of thing. So as you look to come up with your corporate plan of how AI is out there, and you will see distractors and supporters of it, some people from deep fakes and other concerns, and it ties into our social media area. It's very scary, but if you approach it as a tool, Excel is a tool, Google search is a tool, Word is a tool, and then have your policies and practices in place of how you will look at it. I do not envision AI as taking over or solving. It'll help us assess larger sets of data that we don't really have a strong sense of ability to do right now. But again, it's a tool. It's never going to be that final decision making person, because that ties in, Catherine and I think are like-minded as why we looked at technology and its benefits. It is also that behavioral wellness thing, and it's just like a coin. You cannot separate the two sides of a coin.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, like, this has been an absolutely phenomenal conversation. We're just about a minute over time. So thank you both being so gracious with your time and with your answers. We greatly appreciate it. And I know our audience is really thankful for having both of you here with us this morning. Please, thank you again. Another special thanks goes to Sims Software for supporting today's programming, and to everyone watching online. Thank you for tuning in. The webinar, when it ends, a short survey will appear. Please take a moment to complete it. We really do use this feedback to help improve our own processes and our own content moving forward. Speaking of moving forward, looking ahead, we have some exciting events coming up on Thursday, October 17th. We're going to be holding an event deploying AI at the edge, building a resilient architecture. This is TSSCI event that includes a keynote panel and a discussion. More on the logistics on our website. Our speakers include the NSA CISO, Mark Sullivan, the NGA CIO, Mark Chatelain, Zeke Maldonado, the Director of Technology and Data Services at DHS INA, and it will be moderated by Dr. John Beeler, former Chief AI Officer and Director of S&T for the IC, and who is now the Executive Director of ARLIS. He will moderate again. On November 12th, we will host a coffee and conversation with Gurpreet Bhatia. He is the Principal Director for Cybersecurity and the Deputy CISO at DoD. Hope you will be able to join us for that. And on November 14th, we will hold a leadership dinner honoring the DIA Director, General Jeffrey Cruz, at the Hilton McLean in Tice's Corner. You can find all of these details on all of our upcoming programs, these and others, on insaonline.org. That concludes our event today. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a great rest of your day and week.